It's not news that physical games are a way of the past. I'm not saying anything new by letting you know that at some point in the near future, it's going to be next to impossible to walk into your local game store and buy a PlayStation 6 or Xbox Series whatever disc and pop it into your console. The writing is on the walls, with Best Buy closing down their entire physical media department. Digital sales numbers have been on a steady rise over the last several years, and Sony themselves have even shut down a Blu-ray manufacturing location just this year. Now, in all fairness, that's just a location that prints, read, and write Blu-rays, not the same type of Blu-rays that consoles use for their games. But if physical media is alive and well, why would they be shutting down locations like this? Hey folks, it's the Comic Book Gamer here. So, the point of this video isn't to completely rag on physical media. As someone that just spent over an hour talking about every physical PlayStation game I own, I am a huge fan of physical media. To me, there is no greater feeling than being surrounded by the things I love and seeing my collection right in my face of all the games I've picked up and enjoy. Same goes for my movie and TV show collection in Blu-rays as well. The actual point of this video is to recognize the reality of the future of physical media and how we can preserve it, or at the very least, keep it alive for a little bit longer, as long as possible. Now, before we move on, please be sure to help me out by clicking the like button down below if this topic interests you. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my next video, and drop a comment down below as well to let me know your stance on physical games. So, as we know, the cheapest PS5 Slim and the PS5 Pro come standard as digital editions only, but Sony's been throwing us a bone by allowing us to buy a disc reader for an additional price. To be completely honest, I think this is great because Sony recognizes the financial reality of physical media being phased out and the profit of selling digital games on their own service, so they don't have to pay for manufacturing, shipping, licensing in the stores, etc. But they also don't want to exclude their fan base that still appreciates physical games. Recently, it's been reported that 82% of PS5 consoles sold have been disc editions, meaning a vast majority of gamers want to at least have the option for physical media. As far as games themselves, about 50% are physical versus digital in the US, but once you factor in the worldwide numbers, it skews more in favor of physical over digital. Now, that number is gradually shifting more digital as the trends continue worldwide, but that goes to show that Sony isn't ready to go all digital quite yet, and us everyday consumers aren't quite ready for that either. I mean, imagine the amount of people that have bought a used copy of a game they normally wouldn't have bought because it was on sale, for example, and they found out that they love the game and now they are a fan of the franchise and want to purchase more. Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, for that matter, recognize the ongoing marketing that their older physical media games do for their franchise and future releases. They're not going to pull the rug out from everyone and make it more difficult for people to get into new franchises. At least not yet. Yes, there are demos available or services like PlayStation Plus and Game Pass, but overall, their bigger profit margins are when people actually buy the game. But moving on from that, let's also look at the reality of what the physical games are, because it's a bit of a mixed bag. All that a physical game is today is a key to access a game. A physical game from Sony, Microsoft, and in some cases Nintendo is purely a license to be able to play something. You're not actually playing anything locally on the disc or the cart itself. When you buy a brand new PS5 disc, you pop the disc in and it's immediately installing the game to your PS5's SSD. Then when you go to actually play the game isn't playing from the disc, the game is playing from the SSD, and the disc is only telling the PS5 that you're allowed to play this game. This is to prevent the obvious situation where you buy a game, install it to your console, and then return the disc, but still play the installed game on the console. With how big games are, this makes sense, and I don't really fault the console makers for this. Now, this whole key and license thing, I'm going to put a quick pin in this and come back to it, but for now, I'm going to touch base on optical drives themselves. With physical media starting to get phased out, disc readers are also going out as well. They are alive and well, but naturally, if discs will become less and less available in the future, the need for physical optical drives to read those discs will dwindle as well. As the drive becomes less necessary, the materials will start to get phased out and will eventually become more expensive to include a drive, or even financially nonsensical to offer it separately, anyways. So, how do we keep physical games alive if the drives themselves are eventually going to get phased out too? My thought would be to shift physical media from Blu ray to a cart format like an SD card. At first, I thought this would be a step in the wrong direction. Wouldn't even be possible, or wouldn't even make sense. But all three of these objections are wrong. First, is it a step in the wrong direction? It wouldn't be, because the whole premise of physical media in today's age is a step in the wrong direction as it is. There are clear and obvious benefits to digital media, and with the state of physical games just being a license to access a game itself, then the advantage of physical media starts to go out the window and essentially becomes a nostalgic advantage, harkening back to when games were solely physical. Second, is this even possible? Yes, it absolutely is. The whole shift to Blu ray was in the PlayStation 3 era. This allowed for games to be much larger due to graphical and general game content being more demanding, while being able to be played locally from the disc, same as previous generations. Eventually, within that same generation, games got larger to the point where it was faster to install the games to the system's hard drive and play the games from the hard drive using the disk as a license to access it. Sound familiar? However, the moment that switch happened, it wouldn't have been any different if the game were on an SD card needing to be installed versus a disk. On average, an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc can hold up to 128 gigabytes with a read speed of about 50 megabits per second. An SD card can be configured to 128 gigabytes and higher with about double the read speed at about 100 megabits per second. The read speed would only matter when it comes to the install time of a game. Because again, games aren't being played locally from the disc, they're being played from the hard drive itself. So if a Blu-ray disc would take on average an hour to install a game, for example, it would roughly take 2 hours to install that same game from an SD card. After that, the SD card is acting as a license to play the game the exact same way a Blu-ray disc is being used today. Also, the ability to read an SD card is much cheaper than an optical disk drive reader. This can be done by a physical SD card reader built into the next generation of consoles themselves, or it can be a simple third-party attachment that connects via USB-C. All that the SD card needs to do is to send the install information to the console and a simple command to launch the game every time you're ready to play it. Lastly, does this make any sense? Again, it absolutely does. There is still a huge market for physical media of some kind. The Nintendo Switch, as popular as it is still a massively physical media-centric console. Are people really complaining that the Switch should have a Blu-ray drive instead of these little carts? No one really cares about that. They do care that the Switch is massively underpowered, which is why the games are on these carts to begin with, but that's a totally separate conversation given that a disk drive would kill the portability of it anyways. People want physical media. It's getting phased out and we all know it, but people still want to be able to physically point to something and know that they own it, while still having the ability to purchase digital content and not be locked into one camp or the other. Physical media 100% or digital media 100%. People will be happy to own a physical copy of Grand Theft Auto 7 when it comes out in 20 years, even if it's on a simple SD card, because at the end of the day, all games are pretty much digital. The only difference with physical games is that you need the key to open the door and play it. How that key looks really doesn't matter at this point. I don't think that physical media is dead, nor will it be going away next week. But I do think there's a market of people that will want things physically for quite a while, and there's ways to keep it going for some time that can be more cost effective rather than it just eventually dwindling out or causing a massive upset by just cutting it completely at a new console launch. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole physical versus digital debacle, and if my crazy SD card suggestion makes any sense. If you want to check out any more of my content, make sure you click on either one of these two videos flashing on screen. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.